The emergency dispatch crackled through Detective Sarah Martinez's radio at exactly 11:47 p.m. on February 14, 2024. Valentine's Day was supposed to be about love, but Sarah had learned long ago that domestic violence calls often spiked during holidays when family tensions ran high and alcohol flowed freely. She pulled her unmarked sedan through the narrow streets of southeast Portland, the windshield wipers struggling against the freezing rain that turned the February night into a crystalline nightmare. Unit 47 responding to domestic disturbance. 1247 Oak Street, apartment 2B, she radioed back to dispatch, already knowing this call would be different. Something in the dispatcher's voice, a tremor of urgency she rarely heard, told her this wasn't just another neighbor complaint about loud music or raised voices. The Willowbrook Apartments complex squatted against the night sky like a concrete beast, its flickering parking lot lights casting eerie shadows across the puddle-strewn asphalt. Sarah had been to this complex dozens of times over her 12-year career with Portland PD. Low-income housing always meant high-stress situations. Families stretched beyond their breaking points. Dreams deferred until they became nightmares. Mrs. Patterson from 2 had met Sarah at the building's entrance, her weathered face etched with worry and fear. The elderly woman's hands shook as she fumbled with her keys, leading the detective up the dimly lit stairwell that reeked of stale cigarettes and forgotten hopes. "It started around 10:30, Mrs. Patterson whispered, glancing nervously toward apartment 2B. "First, there was yelling, nothing unusual for David Chun. He's always had a temper. But then I heard furniture crashing, glass breaking. The little girl was screaming, 'Mommy, Mommy,' over and over. The old woman's voice broke. Then everything just stopped. That silence was worse than all the noise." Sarah approached the apartment door with practiced caution, her hand instinctively moving to her service weapon. The door hung slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of chaos within. She called for backup and waited those eternal 3 minutes until Officer Rodriguez arrived, his young face grim with anticipation. The apartment door opened to reveal a scene that would haunt Sarah for years to come. The small living room looked like a tornado had torn through it. The coffee table lay overturned, its glass top shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces that reflected the overhead light like fallen stars. Family photos were scattered across the linoleum floor, there, frames cracked and bent, showing happier times that now seemed like fiction. A child's toys were strewn everywhere, a pink stuffed elephant missing one eye, colored blocks spelling out, "Mama," a picture book with pages torn and scattered like autumn leaves. But it was the blood that made Sarah's stomach clench droplets, leading from the living room toward the kitchen, telling a story of violence and terror in crimson punctuation marks. In the kitchen, they found Lin Chun unconscious on the checkered linoleum floor, her beautiful black hair matted with blood, her slight frame curled in a defensive position that spoke of desperate attempts at self-protection. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and Sarah immediately called for paramedics, while Officer Rodriguez began securing the scene. The apartment felt too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Sarah's experienced eyes scanned for additional victims, her heart racing with the knowledge that Mrs. Patterson had mentioned a little girl. David Chun was nowhere to be found, probably fled when he realized the severity of his actions. But where was the child? "Emma," Sarah called out softly, moving carefully through the debris-strewn hallway toward the bedrooms. "Emma, sweetheart, are you here? You're safe now. The police are here to help you." The first bedroom was clearly the parents' room, with clothes scattered and a lamp broken on the nightstand. But the second bedroom made Sarah's heart break instantly. It was a little girl's paradise pink walls, decorated with dancing unicorns. A small bed with a frozen comforter, stuffed animals arranged carefully on tiny shelves, and a play kitchen where countless imaginary meals had been prepared with love and laughter. That's when she heard it, or rather, didn't hear it. The absence of sound from the closet was so profound it created its own presence. Sarah approached slowly, speaking in the gentlest voice she could manage. "Emma, honey, my name is Sarah, and I'm a police officer. I'm here to help you and your mommy. Can you hear me, sweetheart?" The closet door was slightly open, and Sarah carefully pulled it wider. There, pressed against the back wall, between a winter coat and several small dresses, sat 3-year-old Emma Chun. The little girl's dark eyes stared straight ahead with an intensity that was completely unnatural for a child her age. She wore purple pajamas with cartoon princesses, now stained with something Sarah prayed was just apple juice. Emma's small body was perfectly still, as if she had become part of the closet wall itself. Her usually animated face, Sarah could see from the family photos, was now blank as a cleared chalkboard. The child who neighbors described as constantly chattering, singing, and giggling had become a statue carved from silence and shock. "Oh, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, kneeling down to Emma's eye level. "It's going to be okay now. We're going to take care of you and your mommy." Emma didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't even seem to acknowledge Sarah's presence. Her small hands were clenched into tiny fists, and when Sarah gently reached toward her, the little girl didn't pull away. She simply wasn't present in her own body anymore. The paramedics arrived, their equipment clattering through the apartment. As they worked to stabilize Lin Chun, Sarah carefully lifted Emma from the closet, surprised by how light she felt, how her little body remained rigid as marble. The child who once filled this apartment with laughter and life had disappeared into herself, leaving behind only a shell that breathed but didn't live. As they loaded Lin Chun into the ambulance, Emma still hadn't made a sound. She sat in Sarah's lap in the back of the police cruiser, staring out the window as the flashing lights painted the night in alternating red and blue. Sarah knew that whatever Emma had witnessed in that apartment had stolen something precious from her voice, her trust, her childhood innocence. The night that was supposed to celebrate love had instead torn a family apart, leaving a little girl lost in silence and a detective wondering how to piece together a case when the only witness had retreated so far into herself that she might never find her way back. 14 days had passed since that Valentine's Day nightmare, and Detective Sarah Martinez felt the weight of each hour pressing down on her shoulders like stones. She sat in her cluttered office at Portland PD headquarters, surrounded by files that seemed to mock her with their lack of progress. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across crime scene photos she'd studied so many times she could draw them from memory. Emma Chun's case file lay open on her desk, a collection of medical reports, psychological evaluations, and witness statements that all pointed to the same devastating conclusion. The only person who could definitively place David Chun at the scene of his wife's brutal assault had retreated so far into herself that she might never emerge. Lin Chun remained in intensive care at Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, her recovery slow but steady. The doctors had managed to repair the damage to her skull, but the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. When she was lucid enough to speak, she could only remember fragments: David's alcohol-fueled rage, the sound of Emma screaming, and then nothing until she woke up surrounded by beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic. "We've tried everything," Dr. Angela Rodriguez had explained during their morning meeting at the Children's Advocacy Center. The child psychologist's usually optimistic demeanor had dimmed considerably over the past 2 weeks. Emma responds to basic physical care. She eats when food is placed in front of her, sleeps when exhausted, follows simple directions like a robot. But she's completely dissociated from her emotional self. Sarah had watched through the one-way mirror as various specialists attempted to reach Emma, Play therapists brought colorful toys and art supplies, hoping to unlock her voice through creativity. Child psychologists used gentle questioning techniques refined over decades of working with traumatized children. Social workers created safe spaces filled with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. Nothing worked. Emma sat through each session. Like a beautiful doll, her dark eyes focused on something beyond the present moment. She would occasionally pick up a crayon or touch a toy, but these actions seemed mechanical, devoid of the curiosity and wonder that should define a 3-year-old's. Interactions with the world. The foster family, Mike and Linda Henderson, were saints in Sarah's opinion. This middle-aged couple had been fostering children for 8 years, specializing in emergency placements for traumatized kids. Their modest ranch-style home in the sea, Selwood neighborhood had become a temporary refuge for dozens of children over the years, each carrying their own invisible wounds. "She's not really here," Linda had confided to Sarah during a home visit the previous week. "Her body is present, but Emma, the little girl who loved to sing Disney songs and help me bake cookies, she's somewhere else entirely. Sometimes I catch her staring at her own reflection, like she doesn't recognize the person looking back." Mike, a gentle giant of a man who worked as a carpenter, had tried everything to connect with Emma. He built her a small playhouse in the backyard, hoping the physical structure might represent safety. He'd read bedtime stories in different voices, attempting to spark some recognition or interest. But Emma remained unreachable, locked in a prison of her own traumatized mind. The breakthrough came on a gray Thursday morning when Officer Jake Morrison knocked on Sarah's office door. Jake was relatively new to the force, a 32-year-old veteran who joined Portland PD after serving 2 tours in Afghanistan. What made Jake unique wasn't just his military background, it was his partnership with Bruno, a 3-year-old golden retriever who'd been specifically trained for trauma therapy work with children. "Detective Martinez," Jake said, settling into the worn chair across from her desk. "I know you're dealing with something unprecedented with the Chun case. I've been following the reports, and I think Bruno might be able to help." Sarah looked up from Emma's file, studying Jake's earnest face. She'd heard about the K9 Unit's new therapy dog program, but hadn't considered it for this case. "Tell me more about what Bruno can do that our child psychologists can't." Jake leaned forward, his eyes lighting up with genuine passion for his work. "Bruno isn't just any dog, Detective. He's been through 18 months of specialized training with experts from the University of California, Davis. He's learned to recognize signs of trauma, anxiety, and dissociation in children. More importantly, he doesn't demand anything from them. No words, no eye contact, no emotional response. He just exists as a calm, accepting presence. Sarah had seen therapy animals in hospitals and nursing homes, but never in the context of criminal investigations. How exactly would this work with Emma? "Dogs communicate differently than humans," Jake explained. "They don't judge, don't ask questions, don't expect responses. For a child who's shut down emotionally, a therapy dog can provide a bridge back to feeling safe." Bruno's previous cases have involved children who've experienced severe trauma, sexual abuse, domestic violence, witnessing violent crimes. Some of these kids hadn't spoken for months, but within weeks of beginning sessions with Bruno, they started opening up. The idea was unconventional, but Sarah's conventional approaches had failed spectacularly. "What would you need from us?" "Just permission to visit Emma at the Advocacy Center, maybe at the foster home if the Hendersons agree. No pressure, no forced interactions. Bruno will do what he does best, just be a dog. A really well-trained, intuitive dog." That afternoon, Sarah found herself standing outside the Children's Advocacy Center with Jake and Bruno. The golden retriever was magnificent. His coat gleamed like spun gold. His brown eyes held depths of understanding. It seemed almost human. and his entire demeanor radiated calm confidence. Dr. Rodriguez met them at the entrance, skeptical but willing to try anything at this point. "Emma's in the blue room," she said, leading them down the hallway lined with cheerful artwork created by children who'd found ways to process their pain through creativity. Through the observation window, they could see Emma sitting in a child-sized chair, staring at a puzzle she'd made no attempt to solve. She wore a yellow dress that Linda Henderson had chosen to brighten her day, but Emma herself remained colorless, a grayscale figure in a world of vibrant possibilities. "She's been like this for an hour," Dr. Rodriguez whispered. "Just sitting, staring." Jake looked at Bruno, who seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. "Ready, boy?" he asked softly. The moment Bruno padded into the room, something shifted in the air itself. Emma's rigid posture didn't change immediately, but there was a subtle alteration in her breathing, a microscopic relaxation in her shoulders that only trained observers would notice. Bruno approached slowly, his tail wagging gently, stopping about 3 feet from Emma's chair. He lay down on the carpet, resting his golden head on his paws, and simply waited. He didn't try to get her attention, didn't move closer, didn't make any demands. He just existed in her space with infinite patience. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, Emma's eyes shifted from the puzzle to the beautiful dog lying nearby. It was the first voluntary movement anyone had witnessed from her since that terrible night. Sarah held her breath as Emma slowly, carefully, extended her tiny hand toward Bruno's golden fur. The moment her fingers made contact with his soft coat, tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. It was the first sign that Emma Chon was still somewhere inside that silent shell. And maybe, just maybe, a therapy dog named Bruno could help her find her way home. The Henderson household had experienced many transformations over their 8 years of fostering, but nothing quite like what happened after Bruno became part of Emma's daily routine. Mike Henderson stood at his kitchen window on a crisp March morning, watching through the sliding glass doors as Emma sat cross-legged on the back porch beside the golden retriever, her small fingers methodically combing through his thick coat. It had been 3 weeks since that first magical moment at the Children's Advocacy Center when Emma reached out to touch Bruno's fur. What started as tentative contact had blossomed into something extraordinary. Linda Henderson emerged from the laundry room, a basket of tiny clothes balanced on her hip, and joined her husband at the window. "She's been out there for 2 hours, Linda whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. "Look at her face, Mike. Really look at it." Mike studied Emma's profile, noting changes that had accumulated like morning dew, subtle but undeniably present. The rigid tension in her shoulders had melted away. Her breathing had deepened from the shallow, panicked rhythm of trauma to something approaching normal. Most remarkably, her eyes had begun to focus on the present moment instead of staring through the world as if it didn't exist. Officer Jake Morrison arrived at exactly 10 a.m., as he had every day for the past 3 weeks. His partnership with Bruno extended far beyond normal K-9 duties. Jake understood that healing happened on a child's timeline, not an adult's schedule. He knocked softly on the front door, but Emma was already moving toward the gate, Bruno padding beside her with protective awareness. "Good morning, Emma," Jake said gently, though he never expected a response. Emma's communication remained nonverbal, expressed through body language that Dr. Angela Rodriguez was carefully documenting. Today, Emma actually looked at Jake's face for several seconds before returning her attention to Bruno. Progress that would have seemed insignificant to outsiders, but represented a quantum leap in trauma recovery. Dr. Rodriguez had set up a comfortable observation area in the Hendersons' family room, complete with notebooks, recording equipment, and a selection of age-appropriate toys that might encourage interaction. She'd been studying animal-assisted therapy for 15 years, but Emma's case was pushing the boundaries of everything she thought she understood about childhood trauma recovery. "The attachment is unprecedented," she explained to Detective Martinez during one of their weekly briefings. "Most children form bonds with therapy animals over months. Emma and Bruno connected in a way that suggests she recognizes him as a source of safety at a neurological level. Her cortisol levels have dropped significantly, her sleep patterns are improving, and she's beginning to exhibit curiosity about her environment." The daily sessions had evolved into something resembling play therapy, though Emma remained completely silent. She would arrange Bruno's toys in specific patterns, creating elaborate scenarios where the golden retriever was always the hero. Sometimes she would whisper sounds that weren't quite words into Bruno's ear, conversations in a language only they seemed to understand. Linda Henderson had started keeping a journal of Emma's behaviors, noting small victories that painted a picture of gradual emergence from her traumatic shell. "Day 18, she wrote one evening. Emma brought Bruno his water bowl without being asked. She watched him drink and actually smiled, the first real smile I've seen since she arrived. When he finished, she patted his head and made a soft humming sound. The breakthrough moments often happened during the quiet times. Emma had developed a routine of sitting beside Bruno during his afternoon naps, her small body curled against his warm flank. During these peaceful interludes, she would sometimes move her lips as if speaking, though no sound emerged. Dr. Rodriguez theorized that Emma was practicing communication in the safest possible environment, with a friend who would never judge, interrupt, or demand more than she could give. Mike Henderson had constructed a special bed for Bruno in Emma's room, positioning it close enough that she could reach over and touch his fur during nightmares. The night terrors that had plagued Emma's first weeks in foster care had gradually diminished as Bruno's presence provided a sense of security that human comfort couldn't match. "It's like he absorbs her fear," Linda observed to Dr. Rodriguez during one of their conversations. "When Emma starts to get agitated, Bruno moves closer. When she's having a panic attack, he places his head on her lap. He seems to know exactly what she needs before she knows it herself." The therapy sessions had expanded beyond the confines of scheduled appointments. Bruno had become a constant companion, accompanying Emma to medical checkups, court-related meetings, and even grocery shopping trips with the Hendersons. His calm presence turned potentially overwhelming experiences into manageable adventures. Detective Martinez visited regularly, ostensibly to check on Emma's progress, but truthfully to witness the miracle unfolding in the Henderson household. She'd worked dozens of cases involving traumatized children, but she'd never seen anything like the healing power of Emma's relationship with Bruno. "She's teaching me things about resilience I never knew," Sarah confided to Jake during one of his visits. "Watching her rebuild her sense of trust with Bruno makes me believe in possibilities I'd given up on." The most remarkable development occurred during week 4. Emma had been sitting with Bruno in the backyard garden when she suddenly stood up and walked to Linda's flower bed. She carefully picked a small daisy and returned to Bruno, placing it gently between his paws. Then she looked directly into his brown eyes and made a sound, not quite a word, but definitely intentional communication. "Bruno," she breathed, her first attempted pronunciation of his name. Bruno's tail wagged enthusiastically, as if he understood the magnitude of this moment. Emma repeated the sound several times, each iteration slightly clearer, her face lighting up with something approaching joy. Dr. Rodriguez later described this moment as the sound of a soul deciding to rejoin the world. Emma wasn't just bonding with a therapy dog, she was rediscovering her own voice, her own agency, her own capacity for connection. As the weeks progressed, Emma's whispered conversations with Bruno became more elaborate. She would tell him stories about her dreams, describe the color she saw in Linda's garden, and share observations about the world around her. Bruno listened to every word with the patience of a saint and the wisdom of someone who understood that healing couldn't be rushed. The little girl who had been found silent and broken in a closet was slowly, carefully, courageously rebuilding herself with the help of a golden-hearted dog who believed in her recovery even when she couldn't believe in it herself. Their bond had become unbreakable, forged in trauma but strengthened by hope, creating a foundation strong enough to support whatever challenges lay ahead. Emma was learning to trust again, one whispered word at a time. The Multnomah County District Attorney's Office hummed with urgent energy as Prosecutor Amanda Foster spread case files across the polished conference table like a general planning battle strategy. At 38, Amanda had built her reputation on winning impossible cases, but Emma Chun's situation presented challenges that kept her awake at night, pacing her Pearl District apartment while wrestling with legal and ethical dilemmas. "We have physical evidence," Amanda said to her assembled team, pointing to crime scene photographs that told a brutal story. Blood spatter analysis, fingerprints on the broken lamp, DNA under Lin Chun's fingernails from defensive wounds. But David Chun's attorney is claiming she fell down the stairs during an epileptic seizure, medical condition she's never been diagnosed with, by the way. Senior Detective Sarah Martinez sat at the far end of the table, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Beside her, victim advocate Jennifer Walsh reviewed witness statements that painted David Chun as a man with escalating anger issues and a drinking problem that had spiraled out of control since losing his construction job 6 months earlier. The neighbors heard arguing, crashing sounds, and Emma screaming, Jennifer added, flipping through her notes. But defense attorney Robert Sterling is going to argue that domestic disputes are common in low-income housing, and sounds can be misinterpreted through thin walls. Amanda rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of justice balanced precariously on the testimony of a 3-year-old girl who had barely spoken since the night her world exploded. "What's the latest from Dr. Rodriguez about Emma's progress?" "Remarkable. Improvement with the therapy dog," Sarah reported, though her tone carried underlying concern. "She's beginning to communicate with Bruno, even attempting to say his name. But she still hasn't spoken to any human being. Not a single word." The legal precedents for child testimony were complex and varied dramatically from state to state. Amanda had spent countless hours researching cases involving very young witnesses, studying successful prosecutions where children Emma's age had provided crucial testimony. The landmark case of State v. Michaels in New Jersey had established that children as young as 3 could testify if they demonstrated basic understanding of truth versus lies and could communicate their experiences. "The problem isn't just Emma's age," explained Assistant District Attorney Mark Chun, no relation to the victim, though the coincidence of names had required disclosure to all parties. "It's her current psychological state." Sterling is going to argue that any testimony we extract from a traumatized 3-year-old is inherently unreliable and potentially coercive. Robert Sterling, David Chun's defense attorney, was legendary in Portland legal circles for his ability to dismantle prosecution cases with surgical precision. A former prosecutor himself, Sterling understood both sides of the courtroom equation and exploited weaknesses with ruthless efficiency. His silver hair and grandfatherly appearance masked a legal mind that had secured acquittals in cases that seemed impossible to defend. Sterling's preliminary motions are already attacking the foundation of our case, Amanda continued, reading from documents that had arrived that morning. He's claiming that Emma's extended silence proves she's too traumatized to provide reliable testimony. He's requesting psychological evaluations by his own experts, arguing that our therapy sessions with Bruno constitute coaching and manipulation. The legal battle was becoming a war of experts. Dr. Angela Rodriguez, faced off against Dr. Patricia Williamson, a child psychologist hired by the defense who specialized in debunking recovered memory cases. Dr. Williamson's preliminary report suggested that Emma's trauma responses were so severe that any testimony would represent false memories implanted through suggestive therapy techniques. Judge Patricia Williams, assigned to preside over the case, faced her own unprecedented challenges. A mother of 2 young children herself, Judge Williams understood the delicate balance between protecting child witnesses and ensuring fair legal proceedings. Her chambers had become a research library as she studied similar cases from across the nation, looking for guidance on how to proceed. "We need to explore every possible avenue," Amanda told her team. "I've been researching the use of facility dogs in courtrooms. There are precedents in several states where therapy animals have been permitted to accompany child witnesses during testimony. The concept of facility dogs in legal proceedings was revolutionary, but not entirely unprecedented. Hawaii had passed legislation allowing courthouse dogs in 2011. Several jurisdictions in California, Washington, and New York had successfully implemented similar programs. However, no Oregon court had ever permitted a therapy animal during testimony, making Emma's case potential legal groundbreaking territory. "Sterling will fight this tooth and nail," Mark warned. "He'll argue that a cute dog in the courtroom is prejudicial, designed to manipulate jury emotions rather than elicit truthful testimony. He'll claim it's theatrical showmanship that undermines the dignity of legal proceedings." Amanda spent sleepless nights researching the science behind animal-assisted therapy, consulting with experts from universities across the country. Dr. James Morrison from Stanford's Child Development Center provided crucial research showing how therapy animals reduced cortisol levels and anxiety responses in traumatized children. His studies demonstrated that children were more likely to provide accurate, detailed accounts of traumatic events when accompanied by trained facility dogs. The media had begun to take notice of the unusual case. Legal bloggers and court watchers speculated about the implications of allowing a therapy dog in a criminal trial. Victim advocacy groups rallied behind Emma's cause, while defense attorneys worried about setting precedents that might complicate future cases. "We're not just fighting for one conviction," Amanda realized during a late-night strategy session. "We're potentially changing how the justice system treats child victims of violence. If we succeed, we could open doors for countless other children who can't find their voices in traditional courtroom settings." The prosecution team worked around the clock, preparing their motion for accommodation. They compiled research studies, expert testimonials, and case law from other jurisdictions. Dr. Rodriguez prepared detailed reports documenting Emma's progress with Bruno, emphasizing how the therapy dog's presence reduced her trauma responses without influencing the content of her communications. Meanwhile, David Chun sat in county jail, his bail denied due to flight risk concerns. His previous attempts to contact Emma through intermediaries had resulted in additional charges of witness intimidation. Sterling visited his client regularly, preparing a defense strategy that portrayed David as a man overwhelmed by economic stress who had never intentionally harmed his family. "The prosecution wants to put a circus act on trial," Sterling told. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse. A 3-year-old child and a trained dog do not constitute reliable witness testimony. This represents a dangerous erosion of legal standards that protect all defendants' rights to fair trials. As the preliminary hearings approached, the legal community watched with intense interest. Law school professors assigned the case to students studying evidence law and child psychology. The Oregon State Bar scheduled special seminars on facility dog protocols. Everyone understood they were witnessing a potential watershed moment in criminal justice. Amanda Foster carried the weight of this responsibility as she prepared for the most important argument of her career. Emma's future, Lynn. Chun's quest for justice and the rights of countless other child victims hung in the balance. The courtroom would soon become a battleground where traditional legal practices collided with innovative approaches to trauma-informed justice. The question wasn't just whether Emma could testify, it was whether the legal system could evolve quickly enough to protect society's most vulnerable witnesses while maintaining the integrity of criminal proceedings. The Multnomah County Courthouse underwent an unprecedented transformation in the weeks leading up to Emma Chun's testimony. Judge Patricia Williams had made the groundbreaking decision to allow Bruno to accompany Emma during her testimony, but this accommodation required extensive modifications to accommodate both the legal and practical needs of a 3-year-old witness and her therapy dog. Court Administrator Margaret Sullivan found herself coordinating the most unusual case preparation in her 22-year career. "We're basically creating a new blueprint for child-friendly courtroom procedures," she explained to the team of specialists assembled in courtroom 4A. The room buzzed with activity as contractors installed specialized carpeting designed to muffle sound and provide comfortable flooring for both Emma and Bruno. Child-sized furniture was carefully positioned. Near the witness stand, a small table and chair where Emma could sit comfortably, with space for Bruno to lie beside her. The acoustics team installed sensitive microphones that could pick up even the softest whispers, understanding that Emma's voice might be barely audible, even if she found the courage to speak. Dr. Angela Rodriguez worked tirelessly with Emma during these crucial preparation weeks, using a combination of play therapy and gradual exposure techniques to familiarize her with courtroom environments. The Children's Advocacy Center had been transformed into a mock courtroom, complete with a judge's bench, jury box, and witness area that mirrored the actual courthouse layout. "We're not coaching her on what to say," Dr. Rodriguez emphasized during her daily briefings with prosecutor Amanda Foster. "We're simply helping her understand the environment and the people she encounters. Emma needs to know that the courtroom is a safe space where telling the truth will be protected and valued." Officer Jake Morrison dedicated hours each day to preparing Bruno for the unique challenges of a courtroom environment. While Bruno had extensive therapy training, testifying in a criminal trial presented variables that required additional preparation. Jake worked with the dog on maintaining calm composure despite the presence of multiple strangers, camera equipment, and the emotional intensity that would permeate the proceedings. Bruno's been trained to recognize and respond to trauma triggers. Jake explained to the legal team during one of their coordination meetings. But courtrooms have their own energy tension, fear, anger. "We've been practicing in various high-stress environments to ensure he can maintain his therapeutic focus, regardless of external pressures." The media attention surrounding the case had reached national proportions. Legal scholars from Harvard, Yale, and Stanford weighed in on the implications of allowing a therapy dog in criminal proceedings. CNN's legal correspondent, Patricia Morrison, filed daily reports from Portland, dubbing the case the trial that could revolutionize child justice. Law enforcement agencies from across the country sent representatives to observe the proceedings. The International Association of Chiefs of Police had declared Emma's case a potential model for future child witness protocols. Victim advocacy organizations raised funds to support similar programs in other jurisdictions, recognizing the potential nationwide impact of Judge Williams' decision. Defense attorney Robert Sterling assembled his own team of experts, determined to challenge every aspect of the prosecution's innovative approach. Dr. Patricia Williamson, the child psychologist hired by the defense, argued that the entire therapy dog protocol represented psychological manipulation disguised as compassionate accommodation. The presence of a trained animal creates an artificial environment that bears no resemblance to the actual events the child is supposed to remember. Dr. Williamson testified during pretrial hearings. This courtroom theater is designed to elicit emotional responses from the jury rather than factual testimony from the witness. Sterling's strategy focused on undermining the reliability of any testimony Emma might provide. He filed motion after motion, challenging the scientific basis for animal-assisted testimony, arguing that no peer-reviewed studies had specifically validated the accuracy of statements made by traumatized children in the presence of therapy animals. Meanwhile, Emma's daily life continued at the Henderson household, where Linda and Mike provided stability and normalcy amid the legal circus surrounding her case. Emma's progress with Bruno had accelerated remarkably. She now spoke to him in complete sentences, though still only in whispered tones that required close proximity to understand. She told Bruno about her favorite color yesterday. Linda reported to Dr. Rodriguez with tears in her eyes. Purple. She said her favorite color is purple because it makes her feel brave. It was the longest sentence we've heard from her since she arrived. The psychological evaluation process became increasingly complex as both sides brought in additional experts. Dr. Rodriguez documented Emma's consistent progress, noting how her trauma responses diminished when Bruno was present, and how her memory recall improved during their therapy sessions. Emma's relationship with Bruno has created a neurological safe space, Dr. Rodriguez explained to the court during one of many pre-trial hearings. When she's with him, her amygdala, the brain's fear center, shows decreased activity, while areas associated with memory and verbal processing show increased engagement. This isn't manipulation. It's therapeutic healing that allows her authentic voice to emerge. The prosecution team worked around the clock, preparing backup strategies in case Judge Williams changed her mind about allowing Bruno in the courtroom. Amanda Foster studied every possible approach to obtaining Emma's testimony, from closed-circuit television to recorded depositions, but each alternative seemed to diminish the likelihood of Emma finding her voice. Technical preparations consumed weeks of planning. The court's IT department installed multiple camera angles to ensure jury members could observe Emma's nonverbal communications. Sound technicians tested various microphone configurations to capture potential whispers without creating audio feedback. Even the air conditioning system was adjusted to maintain optimal temperature for both human and canine comfort. Security protocols required extensive revision to accommodate Bruno's presence. Metal detectors were recalibrated to ignore his therapy vest and identification tags. Additional court officers received training in dog behavior and emergency procedures. The entire courthouse staff attended sensitivity training about working with traumatized child witnesses. Emma's visits to the actual courtroom began 3 weeks before the scheduled testimony date. Dr. Rodriguez brought her during off hours, allowing her to explore the space with Bruno by her side. Emma spent considerable time examining the judges' bench, the jury box, and the witness area, asking Bruno questions about what each area was for in their special whispered conversations. She's mapping the territory, Dr. Rodriguez observed to Jake Morrison during one of these familiarization visits. Emma's learning that this is a place where important conversations happen, where truth-telling is valued and protected. Bruno's presence transforms what could be an intimidating environment into a manageable space. The final preparation phase involved careful coordination between all parties. Emma would be accompanied by Dr. Rodriguez, Jake Morrison, and Bruno, with Linda Henderson available for emotional support if needed. Prosecutor Amanda Foster refined her questioning strategy to use simple, age-appropriate language that wouldn't overwhelm Emma's developing communication skills. As the trial date approached, everyone involved understood they were participating in a historic moment. The success or failure of Emma's testimony would influence child witness protocols for decades to come. Legal textbooks would be rewritten based on what happened in that Portland courtroom. The impossible was about to be attempted, giving voice to a voiceless child through the healing power of an extraordinary dog, while maintaining the integrity of criminal justice proceedings that could determine a dangerous man's freedom or imprisonment. March 15, 2024, dawned gray and drizzling in Portland, as if the Pacific Northwest sky itself understood the gravity of what was about to unfold in courtroom 4A of the Multnomah County Courthouse. By 7 a.m., news vans lined the street outside. The imposing brick building, their satellite dishes reaching toward the overcast heavens like mechanical prayers for justice. Inside her hotel room 6 blocks away, Detective Sarah Martinez checked her watch for the 15th time in 10 minutes. She had barely slept, her mind cycling through every detail of the case that had consumed her life for the past 2 months. Today, Emma Chun would either find her voice or remain forever silent about the night that shattered her world. Sarah, dressed carefully in her best navy suit, understanding that she wasn't just attending a trial, she was witnessing potential legal history. At the Henderson household, Linda carefully braided Emma's dark hair while the little girl sat unusually. Still, her attention focused on Bruno, who lay beside the vanity chair with his golden head resting on his paws. Emma wore a soft purple dress, her brave color, as she had whispered to Bruno the night before, with comfortable white shoes that Linda had selected specifically for their silence on courtroom floors. "Ready for your big day, sweetheart?" Linda asked gently, though she didn't expect a verbal response. Emma looked at her reflection in the mirror, then at Bruno, then back to her own dark eyes. Something in her expression had changed overnight. A subtle shift from fearful withdrawal to quiet determination that made Linda's heart flutter with hope. Officer Jake Morrison arrived at exactly 8 a.m. for the final preparation session. Bruno's therapy vest gleamed with fresh brushing, his identification badges properly positioned, his demeanor radiating the calm confidence that had made him legendary among child trauma specialists. Jake had spent the previous evening reviewing every aspect of courtroom protocol with Bruno, ensuring the golden retriever understood the unique challenges ahead. "How are you feeling, Emma?" Dr. Angela Rodriguez asked as she joined the group. In the Hendersons' living room, Emma didn't answer verbally, but she moved closer to Bruno and placed her small hand on his neck, her gesture for feeling safe but nervous. Dr. Rodriguez recognized the signal and nodded approvingly. Emma's nonverbal communication had become increasingly sophisticated during their weeks of preparation. The courthouse had been transformed into something resembling a fortress of media attention. Reporters from major networks positioned themselves strategically around the building's perimeter, their cameras trained on every entrance. Inside, Court Administrator Margaret Sullivan coordinated the complex logistics of accommodating dozens of observers, legal experts, and media representatives, while maintaining the dignity and security of the proceedings. Judge Patricia Williams arrived 2 hours early, using the quiet time to review her extensive notes on child witness protocols and animal-assisted therapy research. Her chambers had become a library of legal precedents, psychological studies, and case law from jurisdictions across the nation. She understood that her decisions today would be scrutinized by appellate courts, law schools, and victim advocacy organizations for decades to come. Prosecutor Amanda Foster and her team occupied a war room adjacent to the courthouse, making final adjustments to their questioning strategy. Every word Emma might speak would be precious. They couldn't afford to waste opportunities with confusing questions or overwhelming pressure. Amanda had practiced her gentle questioning techniques with child psychology experts, refining her approach to create maximum comfort while eliciting crucial testimony. Defense attorney Robert Sterling prepared his own strategy in a conference room across the hall. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit immaculate, his legal arguments sharpened to surgical precision. Sterling's reputation had been built on dismantling prosecution cases through methodical destruction of witness credibility. Today, he faced the unprecedented challenge of cross-examining a 3-year-old girl accompanied by a therapy dog. At 9:30 a.m., the media circus reached fever pitch as Emma's entourage arrived at the courthouse. Dr. Rodriguez held Emma's right hand while Jake Morrison walked on her left side with Bruno's leash. Emma wore small sunglasses that Linda had provided to shield her from camera flashes. But even behind the dark lenses, observers could see her scanning the crowd with alert awareness. The courthouse's child-friendly entrance allowed Emma's group to bypass the main media gathering, but word of their arrival spread instantly through the building. Law enforcement officers, court staff, and legal observers craned their necks for glimpses of the little girl who had captured national attention. Inside courtroom 4A, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. A jury box held 12 carefully selected individuals who had been extensively questioned about their attitudes toward children, domestic violence, and animal-assisted therapy. In the gallery, victim advocates sat beside legal scholars, child psychologists next to court reporters, all united in their recognition that they were witnessing unprecedented proceedings. Emma entered the courtroom clinging to Dr. Rodriguez's hand, her eyes immediately finding the specially prepared area where Bruno would join her for testimony. The golden retriever padded beside Jake Morrison with perfect composure, his training evident in every measured step. As they approached the witness area, Emma's grip on Dr. Rodriguez's hand relaxed slightly. Bruno's presence was already working its therapeutic magic. Judge Williams observed the scene with maternal concern, masked by judicial authority. "Good morning, Emma," she said in the gentlest voice she could manage while maintaining courtroom decorum. "We've prepared a special place for you and Bruno. Would you like to sit down and get comfortable?" Emma looked directly at Judge Williams for several seconds, the longest eye contact she had maintained with any adult since that terrible night in February. Then she walked carefully to the child-sized chair positioned beside Bruno's designated area, her purple dress rustling softly in the absolute silence of the packed courtroom. Bruno lay down exactly as he had been trained, his golden head positioned where Emma could easily reach him. The moment her small fingers touched his fur, something shifted in the courtroom's energy. The rigid tension in Emma's shoulders melted away, replaced by the quiet confidence that had developed during weeks of preparation. "Thank you for being so brave today, Emma," Prosecutor Amanda Foster said, approaching the witness area with careful, non-threatening movements. "I know this is a big day for you and Bruno. Are you ready to help us understand what happened on that scary night?" Emma looked at Bruno, then at the prosecutor, then back to her golden-furred friend. Her lips moved slightly, though no sound emerged. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, recognizing the subtle signs that Emma was preparing to communicate. The courtroom held its collective breath as America's youngest witness prepared to speak truth to power, supported by a therapy dog who believed in her courage even when she couldn't believe in it herself. History was about to be made, one whispered word at a time. The silence in courtroom 4I was so complete that the soft hum of the ventilation system sounded like thunder. Emma Chun sat in her specially designed chair, her small purple dress a splash of color against the neutral courtroom tones, her tiny fingers buried deep in Bruno's golden fur. The therapy dog lay perfectly still beside her, his brown eyes radiating the calm understanding that had become Emma's anchor in a world that had proven terrifyingly unpredictable. Dr. Angela Rodriguez positioned herself at the optimal distance, close enough to provide emotional support, far enough to avoid accusations of coaching. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched Emma's face for the subtle signs she had learned to read over weeks of careful preparation. The little girl's breathing was steady, her posture relaxed against Bruno's warm side, but her dark Eyes held depths of memory that no 3-year-old should carry. "Emma, sweetheart," Prosecutor Amanda Foster began, her voice pitched to the gentle tone she had practiced countless times. "Can you tell Bruno about the night when you got scared? The night when Mommy got hurt?" 23 minutes passed in agonizing increments. Emma's lips moved occasionally in soundless whispers directed at Bruno's ear, conversations in their private language that no human could interpret. Her small hands traced patterns in the dog's thick coat, spelling out emotions that hadn't yet found their way to words. The courtroom gallery remained frozen in collective anticipation, 200 people holding their breath for a child's voice. Defense attorney Robert Sterling shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his legal mind calculating the implications of every passing moment. The longer Emma remained silent, the stronger his argument became that she was too traumatized to provide reliable testimony. Yet something in her body language, the way she leaned into Bruno, the focused attention in her eyes suggested she was processing, not withdrawing. Judge Patricia Williams watched the scene with the dual perspective of an experienced jurist and concerned mother. She had studied similar cases from other jurisdictions, but nothing had prepared her for the emotional weight of watching a 3-year-old girl wrestle with memories that could determine her father's fate. The judge's training demanded neutrality, but her maternal instincts screamed for this child to find her voice. In the jury box, 12 carefully selected citizens struggled with their own emotional responses. Maria Santos, a kindergarten teacher from Beaverton, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched Emma's gentle interaction with Bruno. Robert Chun, a retired engineer with grandchildren Emma's age, clenched his fists in barely controlled anger at the circumstances that had brought such a young witness to this moment. Emma suddenly lifted her head from Bruno's side and looked directly at Dr. Rodriguez. Her lips moved in the shape of words, though no sound emerged. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward slightly, recognizing the signal that Emma was preparing for something significant. "It's okay, sweetheart," Dr. Rodriguez whispered, her voice barely audible even in the hushed courtroom. "Bruno is here with you. You're safe. You can tell him anything." Emma turned back to Bruno, her small face inches from his golden muzzle. She began to whisper, her voice so soft that even the sensitive courtroom microphones could barely detect the sounds. The court reporter leaned forward in her chair, fingers poised over her stenotype machine, waiting for anything that might constitute actual testimony. Then, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds, Emma's voice found its strength. She looked directly into Bruno's patient brown eyes, those gentle pools of unconditional acceptance, and spoke with startling clarity. "Bad Daddy." The words hit the courtroom like lightning, striking a cathedral spire. Gasps echoed from the gallery as attorneys leaned forward. Jurors strained to hear, and even the bailiff took an involuntary step closer. The stenographer's fingers flew over her keyboard, capturing the moment that legal history was being written by the smallest possible voice. Emma continued petting Bruno's fur, her confidence growing with each passing second. "Bad Daddy, she?" repeated, her voice stronger now, carrying across the courtroom with devastating simplicity. The two words contained volumes of truth, months of silence, weeks of healing, and the courage of a little girl who had found her voice through the love of an extraordinary dog. Defense attorney Sterling sat stunned, his prepared objections evaporating in the face of such unvarnished honesty. This wasn't coached testimony or manipulated evidence. This was a child's authentic memory, spoken to her most trusted companion in the purest possible terms. Prosecutor Amanda Foster felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized the magnitude of what had just occurred. Years of legal training hadn't prepared her for the emotional impact of hearing truth spoken in a 3-year-old's voice. She glanced toward the defendant's table, where David Chun sat with his head buried in his hands, finally understanding that his daughter's silence had been broken. Bruno remained perfectly still throughout Emma's revelation, his therapy training evident in every fiber of his being. He seemed to understand the significance of this moment, the weight of trust that Emma had placed in him. His tail wagged once a gentle acknowledgment of her courage. Before returning to his composed position, Dr. Rodriguez fought to maintain her professional composure while internally celebrating the breakthrough she had worked so hard to achieve. Emma's words represented more than testimony. They were proof that healing was possible, that trauma didn't have to be permanent, that the right combination of patience, love, and therapeutic intervention could help even the most wounded souls find their voices. "Bad Daddy?" Emma said a third time, looking around the courtroom as if suddenly aware that others besides Bruno had heard her words. Her gaze found Detective Sarah Martinez in the gallery, and for just a moment, the little girl who had been found silent and terrified in a closet made eye contact with the woman who had rescued her. Judge Williams called for a brief recess, her voice thick with emotion as she struggled to maintain judicial composure. As court officers gently escorted Emma and Bruno from the witness area, the courtroom erupted in whispered conversations and barely contained emotional reactions. Those two simple words, "Bad Daddy," had accomplished what months of investigation, expert testimony, and legal maneuvering could not. They had given voice to the voiceless, provided truth in its purest form, and demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful testimony comes from the smallest witnesses. Emma Chun had found her voice, and in doing so, she had changed everything, not just for her case, but for every traumatized child who would follow in her footsteps, knowing that their truth mattered, their voices could be heard, and sometimes a golden-hearted dog could help them find the courage to speak. 6 months after those two life-changing words echoed through courtroom 4A, Emma Chun Henderson stood in the backyard of her forever home, her laughter ringing like church bells across the autumn afternoon. She was teaching Bruno a new trick how to sit pretty with his paws raised, her constant chatter, a joyful contrast to the silence that had once defined her existence. "Bruno, you're the goodest boy in the whole world," Emma declared, wrapping her arms around the golden retriever's neck. At 3.5 years old, her vocabulary had exploded beyond anyone's expectations. She told elaborate stories, asked endless questions, and sang Disney songs with the uninhibited joy that childhood should contain. The little girl who had whispered "Bad Daddy" to a therapy dog had found not just her voice, but her entire spirit. The legal aftermath of Emma's testimony had been swift and decisive. David Chun's defense crumbled the moment his daughter's truth filled that courtroom. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the devastating simplicity of Emma's words, he accepted a plea agreement rather than subject his family to the trauma of a prolonged trial. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced him to 8 years in state prison, with mandatory anger management and substance abuse counseling. "Your daughter's courage has given you an opportunity for redemption," Judge Williams had told David during sentencing. "I hope you use this time to become the father she deserves when you're eventually released." The legal precedent established by Emma's case had rippled across the nation like stones thrown into still water. The Oregon State Legislature unanimously passed Emma's law in May 2024, creating formal protocols for facility dogs in child testimony cases. Within months, 12 other states had introduced similar legislation, with legal scholars predicting nationwide adoption within 5 years. Dr. Angela Rodriguez had become the leading expert on animal-assisted testimony, consulting with courts across the country on implementing trauma-informed practices for child witnesses. Her research paper, Therapeutic Partnerships: How Facility Dogs Transform Child Testimony, was published in the Harvard Law Review and became required reading in law schools nationwide. Emma changed everything we thought we knew about reaching traumatized children, Dr. Rodriguez explained during a conference at Stanford Law School. Her case proved that healing and justice can work hand in hand when we're willing to innovate compassionately. Detective Sarah Martinez kept a framed photo of Emma and Bruno on her desk at Portland PD, a daily reminder of why her work mattered. The case had earned her the Officer of the Year award, but more importantly, it had renewed her faith in the possibility of justice for society's most vulnerable victims. That little girl taught me that strength comes in all sizes, Sarah often told rookie detectives. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. The Henderson family had officially adopted Emma in August, with Bruno serving as the honorary ring bearer during the courthouse ceremony. Mike and Linda Henderson had raised 8 foster children over the years, but Emma held a special place in their hearts as the daughter they had always hoped for. "She's healed our family as much as we've healed hers," Linda often said. Emma reminds us every day that love can overcome any trauma if you're patient enough to let it work. Bruno had retired from active duty as a therapy dog, though he continued to visit the Children's Advocacy Center monthly as an ambassador for the facility dog program. His partnership with Officer Jake Morrison had inspired the Portland Police Department to expand their animal-assisted therapy unit, with 3 additional dogs now trained specifically for child witness support. Bruno didn't just help one little girl find her voice. Jake Morrison reflected during a training seminar for new facility dog handlers. He opened doors for countless other children who needed to know their truth mattered. And national media attention had gradually faded, but Emma's story continued to inspire victims' advocates, legal professionals, and trauma therapists worldwide. Children's hospitals from Seattle to Miami had implemented similar programs, understanding that healing often required unconventional approaches. Emma's relationship with her biological mother, Lynn Chun, was carefully rebuilt through supervised visits and family therapy sessions. Lynn had made a remarkable physical recovery from her injuries and was attending community college to pursue a degree in social work, hoping to help other families affected by domestic violence. "Emma's courage saved both our lives," Lynn said during a victim impact statement at David's sentencing hearing. "She found her voice when I had lost mine, and now we're both learning to speak our truth." The academic world had embraced Emma's case as a landmark in trauma psychology. Research grants funded studies on animal-assisted therapy, while law schools created specialized courses on child witness protection. The University of Oregon established the Emma Chun Center for Child Advocacy, focusing on innovative approaches to supporting young victims in legal proceedings. Emma herself remained blissfully unaware of her broader impact on society. To her, the most important thing was that Bruno lived in her house now, that she had a mommy and daddy who read bedtime stories without yelling, and that she could sing as loudly as she wanted without anyone telling her to be quiet. "I'm going to be a dog trainer when I grow up," Emma announced during a family dinner one evening, her face covered in spaghetti sauce. "Just like Jake, but for kids who are scared. Bruno can help me teach the puppies to be brave helpers." The ripple effects of those 2 whispered words continued to spread far beyond courtroom 4A. Every child who found their voice through animal-assisted therapy, every family reunited through trauma-informed justice, every legal professional embraced compassionate innovation. All carried forward the legacy of a 3-year-old girl and her golden-hearted dog. As autumn turned to winter in Portland, Emma would often curl up with Bruno by the fireplace, reading him stories from her favorite books. Sometimes she would whisper secrets in his ear, just like during those early days of healing. But now her whispers carried dreams instead of trauma, hopes instead of fear. The little girl who had been found silent and broken in a closet had become a beacon of hope for countless others walking similar dark paths. Emma had proven that healing was possible, that trauma didn't define destiny, and that sometimes the Most powerful transformations began with the simplest acts of courage. Her voice, once lost in the darkness, now lit the way for others to find their own. And Bruno, the golden retriever who had helped her discover that courage, remained by her side, not just as a therapy dog, but as a best friend who had witnessed the miracle of a soul refusing to stay silent. Justice had been served, healing had taken root, and hope had found its voice in the laughter of a little girl who had learned that her truth mattered more than her fear.